Welcome to the Fair Parenting Podcast, where we cover people's stories, ideas, and the progress towards fair parenting.
Welcome to the podcast. Today we're joined by two guests to talk about law. Tommy Williams was born in Liverpool and moved to America in 2002. He's an avid researcher, author of two books called From His Story to Our Story, Volumes 1 and 2. He's the owner of a charity foundation designed to help struggling people, the creator of a community village in New Mexico, a radio show host of Truth, Honor and Integrity, or as it's otherwise known, the THI show. He's a producer of a new document and manifesto called The New Blueprint for Humanity, which will be hand-delivered to the White House, the UN, Elon Musk, and many other prominent people. The website for that is thenewblueprintforhumanity.org. His community also has working groups on growing your own food, health remedies, and true law. Roger Isaacs was born in the UK and grew up in Cornwall. His family originates from Glamorganshire on his mother's side and Devon and Cornwall on his father's side. At 17, he joined the Royal Air Force and worked as an air defence technician for 7 years. In 1987, he emigrated to Canada to reconnect with his mother, sister and brother. A few years later, in 1990, Roger moved to British Columbia, where he continued to work in the telecommunications industry and raised a family of two daughters. In 1990, Roger started training in the martial art of Aikido with Mind and Body Unified. He has been teaching universal principles in Aikido for over 28 years and is the chief instructor of his dojo and a certified full lecturer with the Key Society International. Roger joined THI in 2017 and has been following Thomas Williams' podcast since then. In 2019, he was studying law and he was asked to lead the law group of THI. His study led him to Frank O'Collins and Eucadia. He wants to share what he's learned about the true rule of law, the provenance of modern Western Roman law, and why there's been no rule of law since the 16th century. He's passionate about encouraging people to study Eucadia, learn who we are, what is a true rule of law, and how to restore the true rule of law in our societies. No one is above the law. The new blueprint for humanity is a step in that direction. Tommy and Roger, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Nice to be here, and I hope your listeners get some good value out of it.
Well, I'm sure they will. Do you want to set the scene about what your teachings are and what you're hoping to achieve with the THI show and the blueprints?
Well, I'll preface it, and then
sure.
Roger can take over. A few years ago, we set up some what we called communal gatherings, and it's about people coming together on interests that appeal to them, whether that was gardening, whether that was law, whether that was health, and various other topics. And then the law section has become very complicated, even in what we call the alternative media, and it's littered with all kinds of different laws, including common law, which, as we'll find out, is not what you think it is. And so I tasked Roger, who had been studying the law far more than I do, to come up with what is true law, and not the distorted versions that are online. Like I said, that kind of proliferates through the old media. You know, I've had common law guests on my show in the past, and so Roger came up with a whole sections of law in so many different aspects of it. My task was, I said to him, I don't want to hear about common law, Magna Cartas, and all the other stuff that is proliferated over the internet. You don't have to have a driver's license and all that. That can get you into trouble. and define the true rule of law. And I mentioned something that goes back in ancient times called Rita law, which most of your members will not be familiar with. And it's under the golden rule, do unto others as you would do unto yourself. And that is what Roger took on. And so Roger can now reveal what he came up with.
Thanks.
Thank you, Tommy. And thank you for having us on the show.
You're welcome.
Yeah, no, it's exciting to be here.
Thanks for appearing.
Okay, so what I want to say first off is I still don't consider myself an expert. I'm still learning. In my studies, once I got deep into this, like I said in the intro, I came across the work of Franco Collins and Eucadia. So everything I'm going to share with you comes from the materials Frank has been sharing for over a decade. He's put over 40 years of research into this. I'm not going to get into detail about Frank unless you want some questions answered later. But he has given me permission to share information, from an information perspective. What I don't do is give legal advice. I understand that perhaps some of your listeners are dealing with situations, legal situations in courts and for various reasons. And it would be remiss of me to say we could guarantee a win every time. We live in a situation where we have a private guild called the Bar that commercialized and privatized law from the 16th century on. And we have had no true rule of law since then. Having said that, the foundations of what they've built upon do exist. The true rules of law, justice, and due process have not changed in actually thousands of years. They just commercialized and privatized things from the time of Henry VIII. So what I'd like to do, today is talk through some of the fundamentals, some of the components that create the situations we're in today, and why when we walk into a courtroom and deal with family law or any other situation, we very quickly run into difficulty. Just before I move forward with some of that, any questions or comments on what I've said?
No, I mean, my main initial questions were what's UKDM, what's the golden rule of law, but you've covered that and we're going to speak more about it, so that covers my initial questions. Thanks. Okay.
All right, well, why don't I jump in, and I'm going to share some of the fundamentals, and then I'm going to move into some of the mechanisms that have been put in place since the 16th century. There is I think if we just talk about fundamental ideas first, and I'm going to read this because I think it's something that will level set. The fundamentals are those concepts, ideas, immutable truths to which we must find some agreement and comprehension, or else it is impossible to solve any legal or financial problems, and certainly impossible to find true happiness, safety, or prosperity in this life. We exist in a world where the vast majority of people believe that the rule of law exists because the apparatus is in place to create the illusion and perception of law. Once we know what law is, and once we know what law depends upon as its fundamentals, then we're more able to expose the false perceptions and false claims of the existence of the rule of law. What we'll cover today is not a quick and immediate fix. It's not a magic cure or silver bullet. And it's not an exact revenge or get rich strategy, which I've heard lots of over the years. And it's not about pulling the system down. It's about knowing who you are, knowing what the true rule of law is, and living honorably, and knowing what those mechanisms they've put in place to trip us up and essentially manipulate our free will. When you appreciate that common law is essentially voluntary servitude, and that they put a mind-influenced system in place in the 16th century, I think under the realization that in forced slavery, you're always going to get rebellion, they very cleverly constructed a system that uses our free will against us. At the end of the day, when it comes to remedy, there is only one genuine remedy in law, and it's knowledge. It's knowledge of the truth of the law and knowledge of the true concepts of the law and knowing who and what you are. So that's what we're going to dig into a little bit. I'm I'll just pause there. Any questions or thoughts you want to add at this point?
No, that's fine. I'm interested to hear what you're saying.
Okay.
Do you want me to just chime in?
Yeah.
At this point, what Roger's going to reveal in more detail is he mentioned the mind competence or incompetence. So they are stating they can do the law on our behalf as we're incompetent. And yet the irony of their law, which is called legalese, which means babble, which is baby talk, which is incomprehensible, and means that that system and their mind is incompetent because they only speak babble, which then makes their law void. That's what people have to understand. And Roger will cover that better than I can.
So when you say they, do you mean lawyers and the people that run the legal system?
The whole system, the top courts, the Supreme Courts, right down, and your temple bar.
Yes,
it's the rule of the priest class that goes back thousands of years, and they've declared us incompetent, and so we have to go into their court system. Well, actually, technically, we don't. But I would never advise people not to unless they're really proficient in law, which most people aren't, including lawyers, I might add, as they get told what they need to hear, not what they want to hear or the system wants them to hear, rather than what they need to hear of true law, which is the golden rule. Do unto others as you would do unto yourself. It's fairly simple. And
So was that what applied before the 16th century? You mentioned the 16th century a couple of times. What happened in the 16th century to change things, and what did it change from?
I can pick that up if you like.
Yes.
There's been many law forms over the centuries. In fact, one of the books I picked up goes back to 10,000 BCE. And there's been a constant struggle in about 5 civilizations since then that have come and gone between those who promote the true rule of law, the golden rule of law, and those who promote the kind of skullduggery we see today. The short circuit, a long story, in the 16th century was when the Venetian Pisans moved from Venice to England, bankrolled, Henry VIII was bankrupt, and would have probably lost his throne, and settled themselves in the city of London. And that's when they started to build the Temple Bar. The Jesuits got involved with that as part of that. And that's when they started to build out the structures that we know today as common law in the Commonwealth and how things operate. They built off of sacred law, which...
Sorry, Roger, you dipped out there for a second.
Okay, sorry.
I got you up until where you said they moved to London and started building Temple Bar in the 16th century.
Yeah, that's when they set up in the city of London. The Temple Bar and the Bar Guilds that were the original sort of guilds that moved from Venice and Pisa to London at that time. And the Guild of Notaries and Judges, I believe, was one of the most powerful guilds that uprooted and moved to London. So that was the origins of what is known today as the bar. The story starts there, but it went obviously global. And over the last 400-500 years, as the British Empire expanded, we went through the world wars and everything. They've gradually expanded this out across the globe. But in terms of why was a big change in the 1600s? Prior to that, Britain had been under the feudal law from the Normans or England, and it was a form of slavery. Simple as that. The Normans had taken over from, I guess, the Saxons and Danes were there prior to that. But prior to that, BC, you had the Celts, you had the Cymry, the Welsh, you had the Irish, and these were people that promoted the true rule of law. I'm not going to get into all that history. I've got it. But they promoted the true rule of law and are behind a lot of the institutions that eventually got taken over in the 16th century. And so they built off of some of the pillars of law that were around because they couldn't get rid of those things, but they usurped it. And the English language was created by the Jesuit College of English Studying in the 16th century, where they took the languages in the what was British Isles at that time, and Latin, ancient Greek, some of the Celtic languages and that, and they started to construct the language we speak today known as English, which is a very occult language, and we're going to be getting into that because in order to understand law, you've got to start deconstructing some of the words to the origins to see what exactly is going on. Mm-hmm. Interesting, it was through the Shakespeare Folio and the King James Bible and other publications that they started to roll out what we know as the English language and a lot of the legal system that we now know as common law.
Yeah.
So that obviously there's a lot more history to unpack there, and that will take a long time. Very brief summary. A couple of things I want to speak to briefly, and then we'll get into some of the things they did. Tommy talked about competence, and I just want to clarify what we mean by that, because this is really an important concept. And one of the tripwires in their system is if you approach them and you demonstrate you are incompetent, it will trigger powers of attorney and powers of custodianship and guardianship over you, because they can then legally define you as an idiot. And they've got mechanisms in place where they will take control of your mind just by demonstrating incompetence. And it's one of the things where if you go rushing into their system with a little bit of knowledge and they will trip you up, it gives them plausible deniability. They could say this individual doesn't have competence, therefore they're a child, they're an idiot, legally defined, and we now have power over their mind, and we could tell them what to do.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So competence is defined as the term competence comes from the Latin competentia, meaning agreement, symmetry, conjunction, and expertise. In terms of Western Roman law, it means literally the legal authority to deal with a particular matter. It also means more generally having the sufficient skills, knowledge, ability, or qualifications to manage a particular matter. If you do not have the knowledge or skills to use something, then such unskilled use, particularly, may be very dangerous. So, we say little knowledge can be dangerous. This is one of those situations. When I got into this, I tend to be a bit of pick things up and run kind of person. I want to make things happen. And as I gained a little bit of knowledge, I wanted to start making things happen and try it out. And over time, I started to realize, no, I need to spend the time to really go deep and develop my competence, because there are so many tripwires that you don't see.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's start with, I'm going to define again the true rule of law. We just mentioned that because this is...
Can I just ask, you mentioned the golden rule. Is that synonymous with the true rule of law?
Yeah, they're one and the same.
One and the same, okay.
Tommy's already called it out. You'll see it in all religions, do unto others, that concept. Essentially, you can break it down into all people of the same community are subject to the same law.
Yeah.
All are bound to live by the laws of the community. No one may be accused or seek relief except by law under the rule of law, and no one may be punished except by law under the rule of law. So all are equal under the same law. No one is above the law. So when you live in a world like we do today, where you see politicians and people giving themselves immunity, I was watching a thing in Arizona the other week where judges have pretty much given themselves immunity. You're living in a society where there is no true rule of law.
Right.
That is a sign that you're living in a tyranny right there.
So the golden rule is basically, in a nutshell, is do unto others as you would have done to you. Is that right? Correct?
Yeah, that's one way to put it. Absolutely.
Right. Okay. Great.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what did they do is the question. This golden rule and the natural rights that are given to us at birth, they're conveyed at birth, we inherit them. They cannot be taken away from us as a living man or woman. How did they usurp these things? And this is where we get into what happened in the 16th century and what we call the enclosure of free will. Mm-hmm. Okay. So I don't know if your viewers or your listeners are familiar with Cestui Que Trust. Is that something you've heard of?
No, I'm coming at this from quite pretty much zero base of knowledge. So I'm very fresh to this, and I obviously can't speak for the listeners, but I don't know that. No.
All right. There's three layers of law operating in a courtroom simultaneously. The top level is commercial and commerce. You've got the universal commercial code. You've got corporate mandates and policies. And essentially, that's the hook that pulls most people into the courtroom, are those corporate policies and those mandates. And they are literally corporate policies. Every country pretty much became a corporation when they were bankrupted after World War II, and they're registered on the Securities Exchange Commission in the state of Delaware in the United States. So United Kingdom is a corporation that was formed by the banking system, the Rothschilds, when they took over in the early 1800s. So every country is listed as a corporation, and people are classified as citizens, right? And a lot of people say, well, I'm a citizen of this country or that country. What they don't realize is a citizen is a subject with limited privileges that have been given to them. Mm-hmm. And so a citizen is a second-class form of person, which we'll get into. And that's the surface level that most of us are dealing with, where law has become automatic. You get a speeding ticket, you get a fine, they want to take your children from you. There's very little due process. There's very little, opportunity to go and remedy the situation. And the fact that we don't know how to rebut certain presumptions they've made that make it look like we've consented to what they're doing is where we fall down. In order to unpack that, you have to understand the second layer, which is trust law. If you think of commercial and commerce as the roof, trust law is the walls that hold the roof up. And every court knows they operate under trust law. People mistake that as contract law. It's not. It is trust law. When you start to understand the terms and terminology of trust, you'll start to see it. So we're going to talk a little bit about trusts and what went on there. Beneath that, and the root of all law is ecclesiastical. That's canon Talmudic law. And that is the root of all law today. And their authority rests on their claims made in the 15th century when the Vatican issued the papal bull Unum Sanctum that said that their divine creator, their God, had conveyed to them the ownership of everything on this planet as trustees to administer it for God. That's what that rests on, which can be proven to be a fraudulent claim. So this gets trippy fast.
Okay.
So let's delve into a little bit about the origin of trusts and what we call the Cestui Que Trust. So the Cestui Que Trust is literally a trust set up to freeze assets to be managed by a trustee, an office of a trustee, for the benefit of another. The presumption of a Cestui Que Trust is an individual is dead, or they're missing, or they're presumed to be an infant or an idiot, or lost and abandoned at sea. And so, therefore, their property is left there being unmanaged. So the Crown or the state stepped in and says, okay, we'll freeze those assets in trust. We'll set up a trustee, an office to manage that trust and that property under the rules that we dictate, the statutes, unless that individual comes and proves to us they're alive. Okay. Now, this set up the concept. The Vatican had put out the concept of original sin. Now, original sin is this concept that you've inherited the sin of what they say Adam and Eve, and therefore it was such a heinous sin that you're born in debt, you're born bankrupt without any property, and you have to spend your life earning the grace of the church to pay that debt back to earn your freedom. Believe it or not, that's what this is founded on. Yeah. And so, sorry, was someone going
to? Can I just chime in on that?
Go ahead.
The Cestui Que Trust was created when they set London on fire in 1666, and that's what came out of it. And as Roger said, they declared you dead. And where is the best evidence for people to see that they are classed as dead? When they made us all capitalize our names. Just like on the headstones in the cemetery. The names are all capitalized, which means you are dead. And that is how they've, because we write in capital letters, we are declaring ourselves as dead people, and so they take over the trust. And after 7 years of no one claiming it, then they claim it as the state or the trustee. And Roger will get into more of that. But what I want to do is cover slightly what takes place when a child is born. When the child is born, they weigh the child.
Yeah.
And it goes on the registry. Reg meaning king.
Yes.
That's why it's registered.
Okay.
And the weight of the child, say it's 7 pounds, is then converted into ounces of gold. And the value of that gold at the time of delivery is then put in a trust account, the Cestui Que, under the name of the capitalized letter of the child. And that trust belongs to the child. It belongs to everyone. Everyone has a trust. And the church, the Vatican Church, and these temple bar, which they're connected to.
Okay, so who are you saying that this happens today? That what you've just mentioned about the gold?
Yes.
Yeah.
So £7 is about so many ounces.
Yeah.
So it's about 200 ounces ballpark. So 200 ounces, and gold's around $2,000 at the moment.
Yes, that's quite a bit of money.
Yeah, which accrues interest over time. And they, after 7 years, because of maritime law, if you are missing at sea after 7 years, they claim the title of the boat and all the contents and this, that, and the other. But it's the same thing. And the water is connected to everything.
Okay, but yes, where? I mean, who buys the gold and where is it stored?
No, there is. Roger can chime in on that.
Okay.
Yeah. The Bank of International Settlement, the sacrament, I think it's of transubstantiation, I might have that wrong, is the belief that was put out that a physical thing can transform into another physical thing. And so essentially what Tommy's saying is they're capturing the soul of the baby based on the weight of the baby and transubstantiate it into gold bars that belong, when the Vatican set up the Bank of International Settlement, it's held there. And from there, they set up central banks in all countries, and that's where they manage the basically the trust and loan out the money based on all of us being surety bonds for that debt. That's why we work. That's why we pay income taxes, because those income taxes are paying back the debt that the country was loaned from the Bank of International Settlements when you were born. So you're in debt servitude, basically.
Okay, but who? What's the mechanics here? Who's buying this gold, and where is it? And why don't? I mean, if somebody wants to buy gold, why do they need a baby to be born first?
No, it's called leveraging. So they will create on ledger accounts that gold. So they'll apportion a section of gold that already exists, that's already been paid for, etc., and it's accredited to that account. Right. It's like leveraging. And then what they do is that trust account goes on the stock market, and it goes in their high earning accounts of off ledger. You have to understand there's two banking systems. There's the public version and there's a private version. And that is where all the wealth and the money is taken from the public system into their private system, which is largely run by the Rothschilds and certain other families. And they just siphon out. And then when they need to claim extra money, they will leverage that gold that doesn't technically exist, although it does, because all gold belongs to all people, like all the other minerals belongs to all people, not these people who think they own all the mines. They don't. They just claimed it and we didn't counterclaim. That's the issue. So they then leverage that gold amount, which can be start off with somewhere in the region of $400,000, and yes, leverage it times 9 or 10, which is taking money from on your account and putting it into theirs. So suddenly that 400,000 is leveraged to 4 million.
And this 400,000 is a rough figure per baby, based on the gold price of $2,000.
Yeah, it can be, you know. Okay. So let me just do the £7 ounces times $2,000. So you're talking as a start off on a £7 baby, roughly $196,000, which is about 170,000
yes,
British pounds,
yes,
and that is in the child's account. But can you access it? Is a whole new ball game, because the banks who are part of it, and this water monetary system, like maritime law, you know, yes, is the bank becomes the deposit, just like the river, the currency. Mm-hmm. It's all water terms. The maritime law is a water term where maritime law went from the sea onto the land, which is why you go into a dock in the courtroom.
Okay.
And they give you documents.
Yeah.
It's the docking of the mind. Ment means mind, just like government means to govern your mind. You see?
Right.
It's all wordplay. And the water plays a key aspect in it. Look at the child. The waters break, and then you are birthed. Now we will say it's spelt with an I, but they mean it's spelt with an E. You are docking the ship, the vessel, onto dry land, which they then claim. You see, and the banks are the same. A bank is on a river. What happens? How do banks accrue? The deposits. What do we put when we go and put our money in? We deposit it on the bank, which is the river.
Yeah.
And it's all these weird magic play. So I want to let Roger carry on. I don't want him to lose his track, but I felt it was important for people to understand this is how it plays out.
Okay. Yeah.
And I can build on that then, you know, let's help give some background that I can pick up a bit of pace and relate it to what's going on, for example, when you've got a family law situation. And it comes down to understanding what is property, what is a person, and how rights are frozen in trust. There was a concept that came out of Roman times called occupation and possession. And what they realized back then was militarily, they couldn't take over everything, control everything. What they were really good at was creating roles of property and slave names. And essentially what they said is, we'll give you, they say ownership is 9/10 of the law. So what they say, that 9/10 is right of use. Property actually means right of use. It does not mean you have the legal title. So what they said was, we'll give you the right of use. We'll hold the legal title. So you'll never actually own anything. And that's been going on since Roman times. They restored that through the Cestui Que. So when you're born in sin. Now, people think that you go to a church to get baptized. Well, it turns out they carry out the ritual baptism. Midwives do it at the hospital, and they don't even know they're doing it. And essentially, when the baby's born, they cut the umbilical cord, which means now you're lost at sea, you're afloat, and so you can be salvaged. They wipe your eyes and your mouth with water diluted with silver nitrate. Now, silver nitrate is the silver nitrates have the gold atoms removed, so now you get the gold that they're saying we're claiming ownership of your soul with, that Tommy just talked about. And essentially, they then trick the parents into registering the birth, the settlement, the docking. When you register something, you're transferring ownership of that name and that baby to whoever owns that register, which in this case would be the state or the crown. So parents don't realize that when they register the birth, they're transferring the ownership of that child to the state or the crown. You never actually legally own your child. A good question to ask at that point would be to go to the government or whoever the births and records office is and say, who's the trustee of this child? Now, the parents should be the trustee. They won't answer or won't want to answer that question because they've made themselves the trustee when you register the birth. Okay, so the state claims legal title, legal ownership of the child. The parents have right of use. In other words, you raise the child, you take care of the child, you look after it. But they can come and take it from you anytime they want because you don't actually have legal title or own it. That's difficult to wrap our heads around, but that's the mechanisms they put in place. Now, where it gets really trippy is at the age of 7, and I think the age of 7 came about because with the workhouses regimes in England set up in the 1800s, at age 7, the church could go and purchase a child and put them into a workhouse. And basically that was slave labor. Essentially, at age of 7, if you hadn't gone to Westminster or whatever your local government is and proved your life, you're presumed dead, lost at sea, and abandoned. And that's when they create a second Cestui Que trust and put the maritime lien on you, which alludes to the maritime admiralty law, for the debt that you have accrued by being born as a sinner and a debtor. And then you spend the rest of your life working to pay that debt back.
Okay.
That sounds so. I know it sounds crazy, but that is actually what's going on. Now, in the mechanisms they've put in place to drive this in the 1800s, initially ownership of the child was given to the church parishes, and the church parishes would give you a settlement certificate that allowed you to live in an area, build a home, feed yourself. If you didn't have a settlement certificate, you could be arrested and thrown into a workhouse. So there was a move to drive everybody off the land in the 1700s in England, especially because you've got to remember prior to this, people lived on the land. They probably could feed themselves. They had a landlord, a lord of the manor. They were still much feeding themselves and self-sufficient. But in order to set up the Industrial Revolution and create a workforce, they had to disenfranchise, throw everybody off the land, not allow them to build homes or grow food, so refuse to give them a settlement certificate, and then they could throw them in the workhouses to earn their right to food and live. And this is run by the church, believe it or not. Now, that settlement certificate is the origin of the birth certificate.
Okay,
so the in the 1800s, they set up the municipalities, the public health acts, and they put all the mechanisms in place to transfer the guardianship of these the people, the paupers in the workhouses, over to the municipalities, the councils, right, and the state. And they put the current mechanisms in place that we see today as voter wards, county councils, municipalities, states, and all those things. So all the powers of guardianship, of custodianship that came through these Cestui Que trusts were transferred from the church to the municipalities and the county councils.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So they put everybody in a position where they stripped your natural rights from your birth. They declared you legally dead. And let me jump into the person for a moment here, because everybody is familiar with the term person.
Yeah.
And every statute, every mandate, every rule that comes out relates to a person. But do we really know what a person is? The concept of person is one of the most important and foundational concepts because everything relates to the person.
Yeah.
So what is a person? The origin of a person comes from the Latin word persona, meaning part of a character of a play, appearance or countenance, theatrical mask or death mask. This concept came about because in ancient Greek and Roman law, testimony was still considered oral. In fact, all true law is spoken, it's never written. And if a citizen was unable to speak clearly, they would hire actors that would speak in their place as a persona or a person.
Yeah.
In other words, a fictional person to represent them. And that's where the word testimony came from, because apparently the actor was sworn to recite the truth. And if they didn't, they risked having their testicles removed. And that's where the testimony came from. The word person first appeared in our law in the 16th century, and that came out through the folios of Shakespeare. And there was another guy, Dennis Godfrey, who produced some Eurus Civilis. It's called. I don't know what that is. I haven't read it. But that's when the word person was introduced and first appeared. And so essentially, this is where they started to deviate from some of the sacred law that existed under the Saxons and the previous people prior to 16th century. In Saxon times and in Celtic times, your oath was considered your bond. And they felt that a living flesh or man was of paramount importance as their word was telling the truth. And that you couldn't be convicted on any testimony gained through torture or coercion, and that your word must be given freely and without duress to be regarded as true and reliable. They abolished this concept of bringing an actor or persona that came out of Roman times. They said, no, we're going back to the ancient Celtic beliefs that occurred well before Christ, 500 BC beyond, where your word was your bond, and people would give their words freely and without duress to be guarded as true and reliable. Now, this is really an important point, because if ever you're dealing with their system and they're asking you to consent or presuming you consent, one of the outs is you can say, I agree to what it is I need to do, but under coercion, and it does not require consent, and it's out of necessity. And when you state that, they cannot pin the liability onto you, because even today, they cannot coerce you. It has to be free will.
Yes.
You're just tricked into it.
Yeah.
Okay, so person was defined in the modern term. People usually refer to Sir William Blackstone. And he refers to a person. I'm going to read what he says, because this is really important to understand.
Okay.
If you think when you're born, you should be born with natural creator-given rights that no one can take from you as a living man and woman, then they can't usurp that. Free will is one of the most powerful concepts of the universe. In fact, the universe will always resist tyranny. And if you look at history, whenever there is a tyranny exists, eventually free will overthrow that tyrant. That's why they realize we need to go to a mind influence system of government, like Tommy said, where we manage the minds of the slaves, because they know they can't usurp free will, but they can direct it.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Okay, so what Sir William Blackstone said about persons is rights are liable to another subdivision, being either first those which concern and are annexed to the persons of men or women, and are then called jura personarum, or the rights of persons, or they are secondly such as a man may acquire over external objects or things unconnected with his person, which is styled jura reruma, the rights of things. I'll unpack that in a moment, why that's important. Persons are also divided by the law into either natural persons or artificial. Natural persons are such as God of nature formed us. Artificial are such as created and devised by human laws for the purpose of society and government. So what I'm telling you here, an artificial person is created at birth for the purpose of society and government. And that's how they get around free will, through the ritual of baptism. They declare you dead. they trick the parent into conveying ownership of the baby to the state. And because you're now dead, abandoned, and lost at sea, at the age of 7, because you didn't show up and lay yourself alive, they put a maritime lien on that fictional entity that is now legally dead. And now they can do what they want with that entity because it's legally dead. It has no mind. And the natural rights and rules of the universe don't apply to a dead thing or a person. So they put this fictional layer on top of reality.
So what happens if a child's not baptized or not registered, the birth's not registered? I'm guessing that the state will still claim ownership.
Yeah,
No, technically they can't, but they will then, from my understanding and speaking to people over time, the state then presses you into that registration, you see.
Right.
And this is where your family courts come in.
Well, also, I think you probably need to register the birth to get child benefit. That's probably quite a heavy incentive for some.
But you know, if that trust accrues, at the rate that they, you know, the interest rates that they gain are in the region of 10 to 20% a year, way more than what we get, and sometimes it's way higher because they manipulate it. You know, one person that I do know of who managed to get it into his trust account, and you've got to have the approval of the bank manager, who won't give you it unless you are one of their insiders. There was somewhere in the region of 160 million in that guy's account.
Right.
You know, but what Roger's saying is the person is an actor. This is all a stage play. It's all theatre. Government is theatre. It's not run by politicians. It's run by these secret elites.
Right.
You know, law is not run by lawyers. It's run by these Cohens, the priest class that goes back in time with the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the temples. Like I said, every temple means a sacrifice center. Whether it was Solomon, Herod, Angkor Wat, that's where they used to sacrifice our people. All law is Talmudic law. Now, the 7 years is when your blood changes. That is why they declared 7 years. Every 7 years, your blood recycles.
Okay.
And so at 7 years, they declare you dead. And to go, I know there's a lot of interest in family law. What Roger's just described is of the skullduggery that goes on in family law, and I've covered it in the show in the past, some horrific stories of where the state just snatched the child.
Yes.
And then you go into these private law courts where you cannot have a representative and all that stuff. The reason they can do that is because when you registered, you abandoned the child. Yeah. So you are classed as abandoning your own child, you see. That's how it doubles back. But they didn't tell you.
Why do they have to do that? Well, I mean, the bit I'm not understanding the bit about them putting gold in your name and declaring you dead and saying that you've abandoned the child. I mean, if they are, I don't understand why they have to. It's almost like a charade that they're going through. Where if their intentions are to just take ownership of a child and rule over the parents or rule over a human, whether they're a parent or not, why do they need to go through? Those stages.
I can briefly add, and I'll let Roger take over. It's all about the money.
Right.
And money is our life force energy. You know, if people really understood that term, your labor is you using your life force energy to create pieces of paper with numbers on.
Yes.
That's how you cannot base it to the level of money. We're using our life force energy, precious life force energy, I might add, that people don't respect enough.
Yes.
And it's being transferred into pieces of paper with numbers on, of what we call money.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like the Rothschild says, I don't care about laws as long as I own the finances of the country, I control it.
Right.
And what they're saying, people will think of it in base terms of pieces of paper with numbers on, when it really means I'm taking over all of your life force energy.
Right.
It's a harvesting system. That is so if they've got control of all the life force energy, they control us per se. And then they create fictional actors, and we go into court thinking, well, my name's Thomas Williams. Well, actually, it's not. I'm the living representative of the person called Thomas Williams with a capital T, everything else lowercase, capital W, and everything else lowercase, which is then determining I'm a live living being.
Okay.
So if I jump in here and pick up what you said there, this is really fundamental as to the why. The people that put this system in place understand how the universe works. They understand there is a divine creator. I'm not using the word God for a reason. I'm not going to get into that right now. But there is a divine intelligence. In Ucadia, it's being called unique collective awareness. And I like that because it's a combination of all things, all intelligence, everything that exists in this universe. So if we accept there is a intelligent creative power, when that divine intelligence wants to have an individual experience, it separates a piece of itself off as one unit, and it creates an individual man or woman or soul that then chooses to incarnate on this planet as a living man or woman. Your natural rights and equality are conveyed through that process. So in other words, when a divine creator separates a single unit of itself that we call a soul, it conveys full rights and full equality to that soul. Everything is equal at that level. That soul decides to incarnate as a living man or woman. It then conveys those natural rights to the baby that is born. Right? Yeah. That's the process. That's what we're born with, and everyone has equal right and equal claim to all the resources on this planet. Right? Well, they came in and they understood that, well, we can't usurp that because that's free will. And you cannot usurp the free will of the universe. The big karma will come back and hit you, and they know this. But what we can do is we can create a fictional entity called a person that's legally dead in the processes we've just talked about, and then we can annex rights, shrink them into different kinds of person, and that person then has limited rights and benefits that we'll give them if they obey our rules. If they don't obey our rules, they won't get those benefits. Okay? So that's how they enclose free will, by creating an artificial person that's legally dead. It's a piece of paper, all capitals, as Tommy said, demonstrates that name. What they're tricking you to doing is consenting. So if you're sent a summons, for example, say they've taken your children and say, here's a summons, you've got to come to court. That summons is sent to a third person. It's all capitals. I think it's on yellow or pink paper. Can't remember which. That defines a legal or statutory person known as a thing. A thing has no mind or will of its own. Hence, you need a lawyer or a barrister to represent you. And that's why you can't speak, because things can't speak. Now, if you haven't rebutted their claim that you're a thing by submitting the right affidavits and paperwork to the court before you go there, the moment you put your foot through the door, you've consented to being a thing. And you need to be able to think on your feet and know what to do if you want to get out of that category in the courtroom, if you haven't rebutted it already.
Yeah.
So this is what they're doing, and they're doing it because what they're saying is this is their this is how they kind of hide behind things. They say, well, hey, the truth is out there, but these people are too lazy to go study it. They're too busy, doing their things, enjoying themselves. And, they didn't come and rebut a claim. And the maximum of law is a claim unrebutted stands. So they've made some presumptions and claims about you. You didn't rebut them. So their assumption is, well, you presume that our claim is accurate and it stands. We now have powers of attorney over you. We own your children. And now good luck.
But I can't see why. Again, I don't understand. I can understand what you're saying, that it's they can't control, or they decided it's not wise to control by force, and so they've constructed this system. I totally understand that can be the case. What I don't understand is why they're why they need the capital letters, why they need to say, well, this person's legally dead. I mean, surely they don't need to do that in order to operate the law as they see it.
They do, because what they're claiming is all assets of the planet, including people.
Yeah.
That's what they're doing. They're having full control of the planet via fake law, a control system. Money is a control system. And they have taken control of it, and so they then control all life force energy, which is going against source. But we are consenting to it because we don't have the knowledge. Look at the word. I spoke to you the other day about the word magic. Government, govern your mind is what it means.
Yes.
Consent. The con was sent to you and you accepted the con. Yes. This is how you have to think. This is how they are operating. And there's hundreds of more examples of, particularly in law and also in religious terms, of this word magic, which is spell casting and witchcraft, I might add. And so they are sending the con to us. And because we don't have enough sin, because sin really means knowledge. That's why in the Garden of Eden story, they said it is a sin to attain the knowledge. Well, the God of sin is knowledge. And so they've denied us the knowledge, and we have consented to the con.
Yeah.
This is about taking over a whole planet and owning absolutely everything. And then they decide how we are going to live, how we are going to operate. You don't own your car because you registered it. You don't own the dog, and you certainly don't own your house. If you pay off your mortgage, and Roger can get into that, mort means death, remember?
Yes.
Mort, we're gauging death on you.
Yeah.
So
it certainly feels that way with interest rates at the moment.
If you pay your mortgage off, you will then get a deed.
Yes.
On that deed, it will tell you you are not the owner of the house, you are the tenant.
Mm-hmm. Is that right? I've not seen that, but yeah.
Yes. Yes, it is.
Read your mortgage, it's in there. I've read mine.
Yes. It tells you are the tenant, not the owner. Because you can't own anything because they own everything, according to them anyway.
Remember earlier on, I defined property as right of use. We need to get it.
Yes.
I want to get through our heads that we are given right to use things. We're not given legal title. The state, the crown, whomever claims that through the registration process.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's a trick. Sorry, quick one here that will explain why this happens. When you go for a mortgage, you submit an application, correct?
Yeah.
Well, believe it or not, you're submitting an applicatio, which means you're submitting and you're conveying rights of guardianship over to whoever you're submitting to. So right in that process, right there, when you submit an application for a mortgage, you're submitting and you're conveying any rights you have to that organization. Sorry, go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, and to go back to the Cestui Que, when you put your signature on a mortgage agreement, there's that word meant again, agree mind. That means the bank. So let's use the Bank of England. So you've put your signature on, for argument's sake, £100,000 of mortgage. The minute you sign that house is legally yours and you don't have to pay. It comes out of the trust. What happens then is the mortgage lender goes to the Bank of England and the Bank of England writes a check for $100,000 and gives it to the lender. The Bank of England then leverages that instrument, there's the word meant and mind again, and leverages it times 10. So suddenly you've given credit to the Bank of England for £900,000 for that 100,000 mortgage, which is paid off by the trust.
Yeah.
That's how it works. It's all about the money with them and taking the money, which is the life force energy. That's what they've done with the Cestui Que Trust when everyone, the fire in London in 1666 was deliberate. It happened in many countries across Europe at the request of the Vatican Church, so they could change history. It became his story, not our story.
Yeah.
And they brought in the law, they brought in this monetary system, that had started with the Templars. The Templars, who were connected to the church and Jerusalem, were setting up shops along the Silk Road and all the trade routes, or routes, as you would say over there. And people had currency that has real value, which was gold and silver. So they would hand over their gold and silver, and they would be given pieces of paper with numbers on to go into the town. Yeah. That was the start of the banking system. You cannot pay a mortgage off free and clear with pieces of paper with numbers on. You can only pay a mortgage off and own that house with gold and silver.
Okay.
That's why you never own officially the house. We are all, we're all essentially renting for the right of use.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it is a complete harvesting system, as Tommy said. And the way they put this fictional layer in place is they understood they cannot usurp free will of a living man or woman. That's a big no-no. But they created an artificial system to enable them to do that. So the fictional person was declared dead. Then they could make up the mind and the will of that person because they have no mind. And they started to dumb the population down, as Tommy said, by burning, London and other places around the world, destroying documents, destroying statutes, and then rewriting his story in their image. And that's where we are today. Mm-hmm. Let me just show you sort of a real mind warp, the concept of marriage that relates to this. The concept of a license. We think you have a driver's license, we have a marriage license, business license. Well, why do we need a license? Well, a license is something that enables you to do something that otherwise would be a crime. So they took the natural matrimony of a man and woman wanting to live together and raise a family, and they created marriage as a dogma and a legal concept. Right? It forms a temporary trust where a man and woman enjoin and conveying their rights as one to the Vatican or the church as a franchise subsidiary or trustee.
Yeah.
With the husband, wife, and any future children as beneficiaries until death divorce, or dissolution of the trust. Marriage is not the same as the ancient union of wedding or wedlock or matrimony. Marriage is created from two Latin words meaning marry. Oh, we got maritime law again here, meaning sea or holy see, and ago, meaning manage, administered. So marriage literally means managed by the Holy See, the Vatican. So when you walk into a court, you're getting divorced, you've got issues with custody and children. It's not just between the husband and wife. You're dealing with a trustee, a hidden trustee you don't know exists, that has ownership over the property of the marriage, your children, and you don't know that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a really interesting point you made about the license allowing you to do something that otherwise would be illegal. And why is marriage? Why then do you need a marriage license?
Well, you don't. But they made it. Interesting. Yeah, they made it a crime to live together. And I think it was in the 18th century, if you were living together and weren't married and you had children, they would come and take those children and sell them into bondage. And that's where the word bastards came from. And that was fully endorsed by the church as well.
Yep. Yeah. Okay.
It's always the church. The church has played a massive role. What we would know as the Vatican, the Roman Church. They called us cattle, and that's also in the Talmudic law book, or they call it religion, but it's a law book. Yeah. The Ten Commandments and all that. That is law. There's that word again, commandment, like testament. Yeah. A test of the mind, that means. Yeah. And then we were declared chattel and given numbers, which is in the UK, the national insurance number. In the US, it's Social Security. That is a cattle number, which is then owned or was owned by the Vatican. Actually, it's on servers now in Belgium, which is why you've got Belgium as a fake country, because it's actually South Holland. They create these fake countries like Monaco and the District of Columbia, which has nothing to do with America. It's not in America. It's a separate organization state. Like the Vatican's not part of Italy. The City of London, the square mile, is not part of the UK. They don't pay taxes and they have their own laws and rules. These are the people that have usurped the whole of humanity with these systems of law and finance.
Okay.
So if I relate that back to the person now, I just connect the dots nicely on why the person is so important. All law, public statute, administrative and court rules and procedures depend and rest upon the presence of the legal person or the effect control of the person. And they need joinder. They need you to agree to their presumption that you're that person. So that's why when you walk in and they say, are you, Fred Bloggs? And you go, yes, I am. You've just said, yep, I'm that artificial person. And then do you understand? Yeah, I stand under your jurisdiction. And you reside at this address? Yeah, I reside at this address. What you don't know is a resident is a legal term that came out of the 18th century, is an outpatient of a lunatic asylum, psychiatric hospital. That's why they put you in voters' wards, because a ward is a ward of a prison or a hospital. And as a resident, you're considered an outpatient of a psychiatric ward with no mind. So that's what they call perfected jurisdiction. You're saying, yeah, I'm that legal person thing. I stand under your jurisdiction, and I'm an idiot with no mind, and I'm happy to be that. And that's great. Thank you very much. Gotcha.
Right. It certainly treat you that way.
Yes. If the Achilles heel is if the person present for the matter or controversy is not a legal person, but a superior form of person that does not agree to surrender its authority to the court, then the court has a problem because they have no jurisdiction. And, remember I said that when the divine person creates an individual spirit, a soul that incarnates as what we call the true person. Law is hierarchical, trusts are hierarchical, there's 3 levels of person. The highest level of person is a naturally born man or woman with divine rights conveyed directly, and nobody can usurp that. And they know that because their right comes from the same logic. They're saying, hey, Big G up there conveyed the rights of ownership to us to manage. For them to defeat the logic that I just shared, they'd have to defeat themselves in their own system. Right? So they know that if you walk in there and you've done it right, and there's ways to do that, I don't know if we'll have time to get into today, to set yourself up as the first person, the natural person, you can walk in there and say, I've submitted my affidavits of truth. That's my claim. Deal with that. They can't deal with it. They have no jurisdiction over your person. And if you've declared what your property is, which is your children, they have no jurisdiction over that either.
But isn't that similar to somebody deciding not to appear in court and the court will then just write an order anyway?
No, not to appear is an own goal. It's called tacit consent. If you don't show up, they just say you agree to everything.
Right.
It's a big mistake to think don't show up. We don't want to get engaged in their system. That's the best place. Best thing is don't get engaged with it. But if you get pulled into it, the last thing you want to do is not show up because that's an own goal.
Yeah.
They'll just
I wasn't suggesting that. I was just wondering how it works, and so you clarified. It's not. I have actually heard of people deciding not to show up in court. It doesn't sound. It's not anything I would ever do myself. It doesn't sound like a wise thing because, well, as I said, they end up writing a court order anyway. So it's not something I would have thought of doing.
I had a friend who did that. And he still got fined and got points docked, and he didn't understand. Tom, I think you were going to say something there.
Yeah, I just want to, again, reference the water term because you were talking about marriage and wedlock.
Yeah.
Lock is another shipping term.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's very interesting, all these shipping terms and the language, the documents. This is what we've decoded, because that's what it is. You're decoding their system, and it's all hidden in mistranslations and like the song Led Zeppelin said, and sometimes words have 2 meanings. Yes, okay.
Well, what we haven't done is we haven't defined the meaning of the word. Like the word human, we've not defined what human really means. There's 3 different versions. And I cover this in one of my shows. I don't want to go too far into it. But
no, I'm happy for you to also, you've mentioned certain shows that you've done. If you provide links to us afterwards, I can put those in the show notes for people to listen and follow up.
Yeah, we did a whole show just on law that Roger wrote up and delivered. And we've also got the law piece, which I would like to read out before we finish, from the New Blueprint for Humanity, which covers the law solution and how to fix it. Some people in the UK with common law think the Magna Carta is for the people's benefit. No, it's not. Magna Carta means the Great Cartel. And the Great Cartel declared all the British people subjects. Now, I'll let Roger get into that. We're not subjects. And it essentially was a change from the monarchy, which was run by kings and queens, into the nobility.
Yeah.
And the nobility is what is the title of the Bar Association. It is a title of nobility, which makes every bar lawyer in America illegal. They're operating under fraud because they're operating under a title of nobility, which is not allowed under the Constitution of law,
right,
or the Constitution of America. So that kind of rounds that up. But that's where it all started. It changed from the traditional kingdoms, which is ran by kings and queens for the benefit of the people, into nobility, and these houses of Windsor, Gotha, Saxe, House of Israel, and all the other houses in France, Anjou and Lorraine. You know, the 3 lions on a British football shirt is the 3 houses of France, not England. Not all singing 3 lines on the shirt. That's representing the houses of France.
Okay.
Not Britain, you see. This is part of the history of how they created these laws and usurped it right down the line. And so the Magna Carta and common law was not for the people, it was for the nobility.
And I can talk a couple of points there if you want. When King John Plantagenet, he ceded all the land and people that he ruled at that time, which wasn't the whole of England. He didn't rule Kent, he didn't rule Wales or Scotland or Ireland, but what he did rule, he ceded the land and the people permanently as vassals to the Vatican. Permanently. In return, the Vatican, the Roman Pontiff, recognized the Plantagenet as the lawful and legal monarchs, but recognized the barons as the Lord High Steward. So when you talk about cartel, it was a power split, right? So when John ceded all of the lands and people permanently to the Vatican, they knew his heirs and successors might not go along with this, so they split power between the nobles and the monarchy, and every new king had to ratify a new charter. And a charter is grant some power or franchise from a higher ecclesiastical authority to a lower authority. So the fact that it's called the Magna Charta, it's a cartel, but it's also, you got to understand what a charter is. It's granting some corporate franchise and conferring some privilege or exemption to a sovereign power and authority from a higher ecclesiastical authority. And then every subsequent monarch had to ratify a Magna Carta till Henry VIII, when they created the Commonwealth and common law in the Houses of Parliament. From that point forward, they permanently locked in their rule, and they didn't have to renew it with every new monarch with a new charter. So it was basically a cartel coming in, splitting the power, playing them off against each other, because the Vatican knew, as its successors took the throne, they may or may not agree to this setup.
Right. Okay.
And if you want, I can quickly dig into, because Tommy brought it up, common law and Commonwealth. I can quickly share a little about those, because this, I think it needs to be shared. Hang on a sec.
Okay.
And on that note, let me define Commonwealth law form, and this will speak to this now, what they were doing. I'm going to read this because I want to get it right. Commonwealth law form, also known as common law form, also known as crown law form, is the form of sovereign territorial law, sovereign law, noble law, land law, property law, and society law created by King Henry VIII and the Venetian advisors that had taken over in the city of London and set up Temple Bar, the ones that transferred from Venice and Pisa. And also they were the Jesuits, I think, or became the Jesuits. And these advisors in the 16th century to take precedence over ancient land and noble customs, Anglo-Saxon, Celtic law and rights stubbornly still in effect in parts of England, Ireland, Scotland, Wales. So, the Anglo-Saxon law was based on sacred law, which is based on Celtic law that goes back thousands of years. And that's true rule of law. They were usurping it when they created this law form. The word Commonwealth is an official 15th century Vatican term created from 3 Latin words. Committo, to entrust or commit. Munis is burden, public duty, service or obligation. And vela, vilis, which is a Latin word, which apparently has been removed from etymology, means livestock or animals. So the original meaning of the word Commonwealth is the voluntary burden, public duty, service, or obligation of the people as animals. And the original meaning of common law is voluntary servitude. So that's what they put in place.
Yeah, so that goes back to what I said earlier about the cattle and the chattel and your national insurance number. Like they brand the cows.
Yeah.
Well, that's what they declared us as animals, you see. The key word in what Roger just said was crown law. That's your City of London.
Yeah.
They're the ones that wrote the King James Bible with letter J's that didn't exist in the 0 AD, the so-called Christ period.
Yeah.
There was no letter J. And this is how they keep changing with these. This is why they use Latin, you see, because it has multiple meanings and interpretations. And we haven't defined what the word was meant or conveyed. Conveyed. You see?
Yeah.
And because we haven't decoded it, their word magic, we've consented to all their statutes and regulations and mandates, none of which is law.
Yeah.
A mandate, a statute, and a regulation. Reg means king, remember. We're not operating under a king. Like register, regiment. We're the king of the mind.
Yeah.
This is probably the biggest thing that your listeners will take away. Look at the words and define them. Go back into the etymology of the word, because they're trying everything to cover it up now because it's coming out, and it's going to change whether they like it or not.
And just to talk about a couple of things to build on what Tommy said there, and we were talking about this earlier. Why do they do this? Why is this in place? What's this about? The core strength of common law, right? And it's about the manipulation of the mind. We just talked about that through government and other words we've used, and of those at each and every core level of society. So listen to this bit. If you think about it, prior to Henry VIII's time, there was a lot of rebellion and a lot of revolts going on in countries like England at that time. People were resisting tyranny. So they put a place in, and this is how they keep us in line. At the lowest level of the worker, the pauper, control is achieved by making all commodities essential to survival controlled by trade, market price, and availability of money, putting the banks in control. The generation of money is then controlled by placing a meager value on work, so survival is by subsistence. So the focus of the worker and pauper is on survival and not organized revolt or rebellion. Mm-hmm. You go up a step to trader, merchant, entrepreneur. The control is achieved through patronage as acceptance to the elite or the lower rungs of peers, and through the prospect of making a fortune through the exploitation of poorer people. At the level of professional, clerks, military administrators, it's achieved through discipline and reward for enforcement against traders and the rebellious poor, with cyclical promotion or persecutions to maintain base levels of fear and obedience. And then at the level of noble bankers, control is achieved by privilege, great wealth, and threat of loss if disobedient. At the level of the monarch, it's achieved by periodic sacrifice, not only of the king or queen, but the entire family line is wiped from history. Well, look at the Russian Revolution. What did they do? They wiped out the Tsar and his family.
Yeah.
So, these are the pillars. And if you look at the world today, it'd be hard to deny these pillars aren't in place.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I'm going to touch again on the water because it came up. The maritime law and how businesses run, and Roger mentioned commerce law. We're operating under commerce law because we've been declared as a fictional business.
Yeah,
but it was the law of the sea. Well, who were the ones who were looting everything on the sea? The pirates.
Mm-hmm.
The pirates of the sea came onto the land, and they created core pirate groups.
Okay.
You see, it's all a play on words, and it always involves water. That's why they do.
You mentioned, Yeah, and you mentioned earlier at the beginning that Britain is defined as a corporation now, and I think did you say it was registered in Delaware or somewhere?
United
This is you will have it registered in Steer House. I'm not too familiar who runs the British government, but the government never runs the government. You have private contractors called Serco, who are running the government services.
Yes, they seem to be running everything.
Yes. Well, Serco is the government.
Right.
So you will. It may actually say on Steer's House, Serco operating as the UK government. Now, in Delaware, in America, it says USA Inc.
Right.
Operating as the American government. That means we have no government. We have corporates running the government. And all
and
the
are these documents? Sorry.
Yeah, you can find them online. Like I say, I don't know the British one, but the American one is called USA Inc. It's registered in Delaware, and it says under the title, operating as the American government.
And that's something people can actually go to Delaware and check and see the document.
There's plenty of examples there online where people researched and pulled up the actual documents. You can see. So the government, the UK and the American governments, because they're both run by the Crown, then collects our money and then privatizes out the government services to the likes of Serco and other groups.
Yeah.
And then you've even got police authorities in the UK that own social services. Again, you can go and check that up on Steer's House. So when you type in, for argument's sake, a social services, it'll tell you who owns it, and you'll be surprised at how many police authorities own the social services. But that's a government service.
Yeah.
So now,
I've not heard of this before. Actually, I've not.
Oh yeah.
And you mentioned somewhere called Steer's House a couple of times. I've not heard of that either. Is that somewhere that
Steer's House? You can go online and look up any company.
Yeah.
And Steer's House is where all the core pirate companies are registered.
Is that for America? Because I know in England, that's for
the UK. It's called Steer's House.
All right.
But this is what they've done. It's pirates of the sea came onto the land, and so when you go into their pirate courts, you dock.
Yes.
It's all connected, and it's taken people like Roger, myself, and Franco Collins, and many others around the world years to decode this utter crap and fraud. And it is fraud because they didn't explain fully what the definitions were. It's a bit like, and part of it is our own laziness. You could actually, on a mortgage or a credit card agreement, write on page 7, because most people don't read all that little font stuff. Yeah. These people are all idiots. And so we're going to give this imbecile a credit card or a mortgage. And no one will read it, you see.
Yes.
Yeah, but in cosmic law or Rita law, they have to tell you what they're doing. So then they get your consent. That's the whole key to law. In fact, we've just written like a mini book about consent. That was going to, that's for the benefits of the members, but, I can give you the details when it comes out. It'll be posted on THI-show.com in the bookstore. and you can get the other books there as well. But this is what they've done, and the whole thing sounds to the average person far-fetched, and we get that. That's what they rely on, you see.
Yeah.
Oh, that's all a conspiracy. Well, actually, no, it's not. The conspiracy is what they're presenting.
Yeah.
The same as the news. The news is the conspiracy because none of it's born in truth. It's a narrative, a scripted narrative given to them by the control system.
Yeah.
And that's how government works. You'll notice governments or politicians never discuss policies. But that's the definition of a politician, to create policies for the benefit of the people. No, they're told you're going to do this and you're going to do that. They're not running the government because Serco are.
Yes.
And others, you see. So once people understand that you have no government, when you thought that was a total conspiracy, then the rest of this more complicated stuff to do with law and the Cestui Que trusts and the weighing the child for weight in gold suddenly becomes a lot less far-fetched, because then people will go, well, if that was a lie, we all thought we had our own governments. We all thought the government services was run by the politicians. Well, the answer is no.
Yeah.
All religions are harvesting centers. They tell you to pray. No, you're being preyed upon. They're taking your life force energy and you're giving it to them. This is how the whole system works. Like I said before, it's all about harvesting the souls, which the Vatican owned many of the souls on this planet because we consented to something we didn't understand or know. We didn't have enough sin, which is knowledge. That's why they told you, eating the apple is a sin, because the sin is the knowledge, you see. They didn't want us to have the knowledge. But that is them telling us that we were not to have the knowledge, and we consented to it, you see. But all the religions, yes, they're all connected into it.
So are you saying that this? I mean, there's so much range in what we've. I mean, if we just talk about the English law doesn't seem connected to Sharia law. I mean, are we saying that they are all connected, or this?
Yes, it is.
What you were talking about.
See, Sharia law is, and Roger can talk more about this. It's another divide and conquer. You see.
Yes.
This is what they've done. All religion stems from one group. All of them.
But then why? And so why do we have separatism? If it's all part of the same thing, why do we have difference at all? Why are there different religions and different laws?
Yeah, because then they get the people to fight each other. Our God is better than your God.
Right.
Think of all the wars around the world because they're fighting over their God. Allah is better than Yahweh or Jehovah or any other name you want to come up with. But they have the people divided. Yeah. Because if all the people came together, then this system would collapse. So they create these divisions, a bit like what's going on now with the LGBTQ. It's about dividing the people. It's only Black Lives Matter is about dividing the people. The feminist movement was about dividing the people and breaking up the traditional family, all of which came from the church. They run everything. They always have.
Think of it this way: if they keep you afraid, if they keep you unbalanced, if they keep you in survival mode, we'll never come together. We'll never work together, and it's easy for them to manipulate and control people who are afraid.
Yeah, I mean, but the thing is that, I mean, I'm sure you're probably aware of this, that there will be people that hear this and say, well, this is conspiracy theory. I mean, what are we saying? That there's a group of people behind all of this who are just ruling things and having a good time and watching us all fight each other and suffer in family courts and suffer in, poverty in parts of the world, and and they're just enjoying it all and having a great life. Is that how what's behind all of this? Or?
To put it bluntly, yes.
Okay.
It's all about control. They want to control us, even in the Bible, and people can go and look at it themselves. The Lord came down. It says, "Well, hang on. I thought it was a collective consciousness." So now they're telling you it's a single being.
Yeah.
In physical form, the Lord came down to the slaves on the Tower of Babel and changed their language and moved them to the four corners, whatever that means.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why would they do that? Why would the Lord do that to the people? Because he didn't want the people to find out and start working together again. You see? It's all divide and conquer. It's all harvesting our life force energy.
So when you say that there's a group of people in control, I mean, again, going back to different parts of the world, are you saying that, Iran and Russia and China are all, whoever's controlling those places are in a room with the Brits and the Americans and the French, and they're all working together in some really coordinated way?
This is, there's evidence of that with, why do we have secret societies? Why do the people never know what is going on in these secret societies? And let's use a more obvious one, the WEF that came out recently, where he told you, you will own nothing and be happy.
Yes.
Yes. So that's not a conspiracy. That is what they told you. But we didn't listen enough, you see. So, and then you've got the Bilderberger groups. You've got the North Atlantic and the Trans-Pacific. These people are deciding for us how life should be and go.
Yeah, well, the WHO seems to be similar.
Of course, they're involved in it as well. They're involved in the medical side of things. Where they approve vaccines and then 10, 15 years later, when loads of people have died or suffered, they go, we made a mistake, and no one is made accountable.
No, there seems to be a lack of accountability. I mean, I was talking today about the financial crisis in 2008, the Iraq war, the COVID mistakes. And we've got the COVID inquiry going on in Britain at the moment. It's an absolute sham, really. It's nothing. It's just it's nothing more than a charade.
Yeah, it always was. So if people think it's a conspiracy, that's fine. But I ask you all, why is the average person not allowed into the WEF, the World Horror Organization, as I call them, the Bilderberger Group, and all the other secret societies, the top levels of the Freemasons? Why, if we're deciding how this planet should be run, do we, the people, not have representatives in those organizations? Isn't that discounting our participation? Why do, even on a base level, why do a government in the UK not bow to the will of the people? Well, for a start, not enough people complain, which is part of the problem.
That's certainly true, yeah.
And so they're creating this whole life experience for us and denying us access to these quote-unquote secret societies.
Yeah. So has this got anything to... I know during the financial crisis in 2008 and COVID, that statistics came out that the gap between the wealthiest 1% and the rest was growing. Does that feed into what you're talking about?
Yeah, it's a harvesting system.
Yeah.
The whole thing today is about law. It's a harvesting system. It's claiming the ownership of you, your life force energy. Forget the pieces of paper with numbers, they're irrelevant. It's your life force energy and the souls they're trying to capture. These people are beyond evil. They've been doing it for thousands and thousands of years.
Yeah.
And it's because it's so, quite frankly, obscene and evil, people have a difficulty comprehending it. But you cannot put your morals of evil onto these people because you'll never get it.
Well, we're not brought up to believe. We're brought up to believe that in good and have faith in systems.
Yes. So the idea
it's very difficult.
The idea that on a base level, your government is not working for the benefits of the people would seem absurd to a lot of people. But where is the evidence? I know it's increasing the doubts.
It is seeming less so every day. At the moment, especially in England.
and this is good, But where is the evidence that they do anything for the benefits of the people? They don't.
Well,
it's an illusion. It's a stage play. The whole thing. And then they bring on the actors, which Roger mentioned with persons, and then they have mock fights between Trump and Biden and Trump and Clinton and I forget, Sunak and several other people. You've changed the government that much recently. I forgot.
Yeah. The Labour Party.
But Boris Johnson, it's all a stage play.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
It's all scripted and it's all acted, and no one gets made accountable at the end of it.
Well, I think in Britain at the moment, I think most people can see the country is not functioning. There's no real part of the government that is functioning properly, and I don't think you'd have too much problem to get the man in the street and the woman in the street to say, the government's not run for my benefit or for our benefit. So I think I think we can all accept that, but it's as to why what's behind it. Yeah.
That's the basis. All the other stuff, like you said, it can sound like a quote unquote conspiracy.
Yes.
The conspiracy is what's being played upon us. Where we've consented to an illusion of what we think they are describing, to get it back to the law section. And so once we start realizing law doesn't work for us, government, then all the rest, which is the next level of understanding how the system works, and Rogers has done 13 separate pieces on different aspects of law. Which we can give details at the end. It will come up. How many people of your listeners today thought the church was involved in it so much? Not many.
Well, I mean, you've got in England, you've got church members in the House of Lords.
It's all part of the
they're right.
system.
Yeah, I think we can all accept that they're in there.
So you notice in the House of Lords, it's only people with titles of nobility is allowed to go in it. And they're making decisions on behalf of the British people. Well, where is our representation on that?
Yeah.
Why is it only nobility people that goes into the House of Lords? You see? So there is a conspiracy right there. because we are entitled. We were born equal under the law, as Roger said earlier. So why are we not? Why are we not? The average person not allowed to be represented in the House of Lords? Why?
I mean, there are some commoners in there, but not. I wouldn't say
they're all dames. Titles of nobility.
Yes.
They're not your average person. These people who get these titles are generally connected to the system. They've been good boys and girls, and they've gone along with the plan. That's how it works. And so they've been seduced by the title and the status, and have gone along with the system. They haven't questioned it because they wouldn't get anywhere near it.
No.
Because the minute you start questioning it, suddenly you disappear or are either temporarily or permanently. That's how their system has always worked.
Yes, I mean, or a scandal or something. Yes.
They only have to mention a sex scandal, and everyone believes that they're guilty. You see, but yes. But that's only assumption, isn't it? And there's another thing about law: we make assumptions, but assumption is not truth. It's not fact. Yeah, it's only a guesstimate of what you think took place. Yeah, and so much of our knowledge is based on assumption that we've been given in schools and TV programs and all the rest. Yeah, but once you start researching yourself, then that assumption begins to fall apart. You see.
Okay. Yeah.
That's
obviously, massively.
That's when then you can understand the enormity of what has really took place over thousands of years. This is not a new event. It's always gone on. Yeah. And people don't think there's enough people who are evil to do that. People assume that the church is for our benefit, the government's for our benefit, the police are for our benefit, the military is for our benefit. That assumption in all cases is wrong.
Just a sort of comment, and I think this speaks to how long this conspiracy, if you want to call that, has been playing out. While you were talking, I pulled up an article I have on the origin of the Judean, known today as a Judaic law form. And I just want to share it as an example of what Tommy just said, is how big and broad and how long this has been going on, and how, from what Tommy said earlier, people say, well, this sounds anti-Semitic. But if you understand what the Judean law form is, that can be further from the truth. It's not about being anti-people and people on the ground. It's about a system that has been foisted on people that is not beneficial to us. So a couple of articles here, and this may come as a surprise to some people. And I'm calling it Judean because the J did not exist 2,000 years ago when this was formed. The Judean law form, also known as Judaic law form, also known as Judaic law form today, also known as Proto-Jewish law form, is the form of sovereign territorial law, sovereign law, noble law, land law, property law, and society law, first introduced by Emperor Vespasian as the official religion of the Roman Empire from 69 CE.
So you're saying, I mean, and we talked about this earlier, that you think the Chinese are part of this, and the Russians and the Americans. There's a part of all of these people that are in this together. So it's not one group. You're saying that across the world there is some sort of sinister alliance that covers most of the people's. Sorry, I lost audio there for a second. So my question was,
I could hear the question. The answer is yes. How is that? Right. How is that achieved? Because they use the seducement of titles and money, right? Or they'll use the fear factor. If you don't do this, we're going to bomb your country. Mm-hmm. And we've seen enough evidence, the listeners will have seen enough evidence of this over this lifetime, never mind previous. And so they take over the systems of control. Russia was taken over when they killed all the Tsars in 1917 during a theatre of war, which then changed the whole dynamic of the Russian government. And again, this can be research people themselves. And then those same people that took over Russia in World War One then took over Germany in World War Two, having previously taken over in France and Britain and Italy. But it goes back to what Roger was saying, these Venetian people. And this is what we're dealing with. They've done this over, most people think most people will think this is too large, but it's been done in a totalitarian creep over many, many centuries. And so they just add little bits as they go along. And look what happened, as an example, look what happened to Russia. All the Baltic states, the Lithuania, Belarus, that was all part of Russia.
Yeah.
Kazakhstan, northern Afghanistan, Georgia, and all the Tajikistan was all part of Russia. Suddenly they come in and split it up, divide and conquer again, you see, and then create a separate principality, the same as the City of London. London is part of England. But no, they came in and plonked a square mile that is not connected to England. The same as the Vatican, the same as the District of Columbia, the same as Monaco, Luxembourg, Belgium, Switzerland, which is said to be a neutral country. It's far from it. And then even in South Africa, the state of Lesotho, which is in the middle of South Africa, and declared a separate state. So this is how they do it. It's divide and conquer. Look what they did to Yugoslavia. Yugoslavia became no more Serbia, Montenegro, and all kinds of other names now. Divide and conquer. Look what they did to Czechoslovakia. Divide and conquer. So those people are now fighting each other over something that they created.
Yeah.
And it's the same as Ukraine. Ukraine is part of Russia. It always was. But then these NATO and agency people come in and split it up and create another separate country. And then further down the line, they start fighting. They create wars with it. The only people that win in wars is the bankers, because they lend to both sides. This is where it's all connected, you see. They lend to both sides and they take the interest. They're not interested in the capital. The capital's already doesn't exist. It's part of the trust, the Cestui Que trust and the bigger trust. They're interested in harvesting the interest. That is their interest, you see.
Yeah.
And it's only when you start looking into these things, and I would say to your listeners, find some of the more simpler things that we've discussed, and if we find out to be true, then go into the other things that you may think are far-fetched or a conspiracy, and you'll find out that's the key. I always say in my own show, don't believe what I'm telling you. Go and research yourself, because once you do, suddenly a bigger picture emerges that you never thought was imaginable. And this is what has been revealed, today about the law, about the government, about the banking, about the church, wars. Everything is all part of it, you see.
Yeah, I mean, when you just said that the wars, the bankers are the ones that win. I mean, obviously, there's another way they win is after the war, because the Ukraine's going to take forever to rebuild.
So Ukraine then has to borrow from the banks to then rebuild the country that the banks were involved in creating the war in the first place.
Yeah.
That's how
And
it
in a
works.
similar, I mean, I'm just relating this now to family law. In the court, you have obviously adversarial system where there should, in family law, you shouldn't have an adversarial system, but they've set one up in using the law, and in that theatre of war, to use the phrase, the lawyers are the only ones that win.
Yeah.
Right.
Neither one of the parents or the child really wins. In many, many cases, the lawyers always win. And so it's almost like that's shrinking down the level of a Ukraine-Russia war down into they're all battles. They're all conflicts that don't need to happen. And there are many things that you could change very simply and non-contentiously to family law, that the average person in the street would say, well, that's a perfectly reasonable change to make to the law. And if you did that, most of the family law cases would disappear. But the way the law's been set up, it pulls tens and hundreds of thousands of people into these courtroom battles that the lawyers profit from, and there's no need for it.
Yeah,
and furthermore, the family court is a secret situation. They don't like people talking about it. They won't let you talk about your case properly. They come down on you like a ton of bricks if you do talk about it. And they don't like what's going on publicised to the public. And I think that's because of the lawyers, I don't think, would dare have what they're doing put on public display. So there is.
I remember it actually made the mainstream news very briefly and then was shut down. But I highlighted them on the show probably 9 years back now. It's the story of a family, and at 3:00 in the morning, stormtrooper police bashed the front door in and took the youngest child.
Is this in America?
No, this is in the UK.
Okay.
They took a number of children, and they wouldn't tell the mother or the father why they were taking the children. They said they'd received a complaint that she shouted at them in the supermarket. That was the excuse given. And so then the woman goes to get a lawyer. But they said they have this private court system of judges and their lawyers who then decide on the future of that child. And you are not allowed to represent it. A couple of weeks later, they brought the youngest child back to the family. You know why? Because the mother hadn't registered the baby yet.
Okay.
The other children were all taken and placed into foster care under the lifetime condition that the original parents were never allowed to know where their children was placed. And they couldn't do nothing about it. Another woman fled to Turkey. It was around about the same time, 2012, 13, somewhere around there anyway, because they were taking their children. And nobody knows why. And suddenly they're fostered out into all kinds of other insidious programs. You have no idea. And you're not allowed to access your own child. This is what they do. So, and you can go and research that story, because it's an important point of why I brought it up, is the average person would never think that was possible.
Yes.
But
I don't think. The public don't know. Yeah.
And so they cannot comprehend that level of evil. And so they dismiss it as conspiracy or fantasy or it's all made up. But this is what's happening to the average person in the UK, in America, and many other places where these organisations, and it's all highly organised, of government, the police, the lawyer system, and the social services and the child protection are all working a separate system to harvest the children. And again, it's not believable to the average person. But this is unfolding. Just because it's not believable to you, and it hasn't happened to you, you have a duty as a parent to make sure that that never happens to anybody, not just yourself. It's a lack of personal responsibility. So because you don't believe it, it carries on unhindered. And people have to understand this. This is where your family law comes in. Go and research what they do with the private courts and ask, why is the parent not allowed to represent themselves and the child?
Just a comment, and you know, if people want proof that the Cestui Que exist, do they really have legal title to a person and a child? It's right in that story. They returned the baby that they hadn't been registered yet. In other words, they hadn't set up the trust. They didn't have a claim of title over yet, but they kept the other ones, and there was nothing they could do.
But I mean, we went over this earlier. I think that I mean, why would they not? That seems like a loophole. And you would say, if these sinister people were really doing this, why would they not have closed that loophole? And I think we spoke earlier that it was about karma. But what you're talking about is so nasty that these people, what they're doing. I mean, karma. Just having a loophole, I don't think it's going to protect them in terms of karma. If they're doing something this bad, karma's going to, and their worry, their main worry is that the karma's going to get them. That's the bit. I mean, it was one of the bits I can't understand. You know.
Yeah, it's the Day of Atonement. They transfer the karma back onto the people, so they don't get any. This is going.
But it seems like a bit of a parlour trick on their part that I don't think's credible. If there is going to be a day of reckoning for them, I don't think they can really get out of it by saying, "Oh well, you know."
But all you got to understand is that's what they believe.
Yeah.
The people who take part in this were all lied to as well. You have to understand that.
Yeah.
Right.
Everyone has been lied to on this planet. Mm-hmm. Everyone's been lied to. And some of the elite families are now beginning to understand how they were lied to. Mm-hmm. You know, I've spoken to quite a number of them, Rothschilds, the Pope, Chinese royals, you name it. Over the time that I've worked with the Trust, we spoke to all the so-called top people, and every one of them's been lied to. It's just divide and conquer again. You know, it's and people go, well, you know, how can that work? Well, it can work over time when we don't know or bother to research enough.
Things get handed down, don't they?
Yeah. It's just an assumption, a belief system that they gave to us, and we think that is real. Well, once you start digging into even the basic elements of it, it's all an illusion.
Yeah.
This is what we're now decoding, you know, and so we've gone into quite a bit today, and I appreciate a lot of things that will have kind of tipped people upside the head of what they think is reality. But what we've been presented in life as reality has been illusion, and we've gone along with assumptions.
Yeah.
You know, even on a basic level, things get presented in school as fact. But did we ask, has that been proven? Or is that just an assumption? It's somebody's opinion. At the end of the day, an opinion is an opinion. And I have my opinion, you have yours, and sometimes you will agree and sometimes you'll disagree, and that's fine. But why are they denying us access to these quote-unquote secret societies, all these fancy councils that most people have never heard of, that are deciding our future? Well, shouldn't we be allowed to decide our future? Yes. Shouldn't the British people be allowed to decide how their country is run, and not some title of nobility and some decrepit old person in the House of Lords, most of which are senile? We're allowing senile people to run the country. Look at America, Biden.
Yes, I knew you were going to say that. Yes, that is kind of scary. Yeah.
But your politician or your president or prime minister, what people don't understand is a representative of the people. So what does that say about Americans? Boris Johnson was a figure of fun. He's like a clown character. And he was representing the country. What does that say about the British people? We're all clowns. Because we don't have enough input into it, you see. And this is what we're trying to change with the blueprints, is the people.
Yes, I was going to ask you about this. Yes.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a bit about the blueprint?
Well, like I said, I've been involved with a number of top-level people. I've spoken to or listened to and engaged with many of them. And I've researched over 40 years all of this stuff and connected it all together. And like I said, most of it is barely believable to the average person. And I get that. But over time, it begins to make sense. And so I recognized a long time back, even when I was a child, this world doesn't work. We're not meant to survive. We're meant to live and have a full experience with abundance. That is going back right to source. We're not meant to fight each other. How many wars would we have if we didn't have governments? The answer is none. None. Because the people will come together. There might be a few skirmishes and the people will come together and we sort it out. But not on the political level. No, we have to go to war, which is sacrificing people. It's all about sacrificing and harvesting again. That's why they call it a soldier. It's a play on words. Soul dire, it really means. You see?
Yeah.
So over time, I've looked at every system. I've worked inside the banking system. When I worked with the trustee, I learned the full mechanisms of how the banking system works, how the stock market works, how governments work, how governments are not governments, how government services are not run by the government, and how the whole world is in utter chaos. It's like the Freemason says, order out of chaos. So what this document is a 29 common sense solutions of how to fix every aspect of life so that every person on the planet is thriving in abundance. The reason we don't is these elite groups harvest everything and just put out enough for us to exist. Well, that can all change. As an example, the American military, who's not operating, it's not American, it's US. The US means British territorial government. This is what Americans don't even understand. The U.S. means the United Nations government. You see? So
Yeah.
why have they done that? And again, these are things that the average person can go and find out themselves. And so I came up over time with several solutions, and then a couple of years ago decided we had to do something because this world is collapsing. It cannot be fixed. It cannot be fixed financially. It cannot be fixed by the government. It cannot be fixed by the church or any other organization, none of which has been for the benefit of the people. There's not a single organization on this planet that runs and operates for the benefit of the people. Well, that has to change. And so I've come up with help from THI members, and Roger was involved in this. Roger did the law section. What is true law?
Yeah.
And so that is one of the solutions. And it's Rita and the golden rule. The golden rule is thou shalt not steal, injure, harm, or murder. It's very basic. It's common sense. And that is all we need to do with law. In fact, if everyone acted with personal responsibility, we wouldn't need laws. The point is, people don't. So if everyone learned to operate under the golden rule, and that nothing on this planet is scarce, whether it's food, housing, water, clothing, or energy, because there's plenty for everyone. Only the system creates scarcity and creates the haves and the have-nots. So this whole solution covers all of that. We're, like I said, we're making plans currently to hand one into the White House, one into the UN, one into the Pentagon, and possibly an agency. Although I don't think they'll like me going there too much, given I've exposed them quite a lot. But there are nice people in there that have helped along the way. And also the Federal Reserve, which is a private bank and it's got nothing to do with America, like the Bank of England is a private bank. And so this is has already gone out, and some of them, the copies of the books, will be going out to Elon Musk, Candace Owens, and a guy called Douglas Rushkoff, who did a piece about billionaires who are terrified and are fleeing underground because they're frightened that people are going to come after them. And that is what is going to unfold. And what I'm trying to, and we are trying to head off, is it descending into chaos and violence, because it will. Because more and more of this, what people may think is conspiracy, will find out it's actually born in largely truth. And once people find that out, then the people are going to get angry. Well, this document is also a part of a blank slate where we start again, because we have to. Like I said, it cannot be fixed. It's broken and lost, whether it's the financial system, the government, the schooling system, you name it. It's all broken down and cannot be fixed. We have to rip it up and start again. We created a new school curriculum as part of the communal gatherings and law, and how to teach law and stuff like that. And so this document will be going to all leaders, including Putin and several of the African government who I spoke to and told them about the trust and the Cestui Que. They didn't know either. And they thought it was all nonsense and went and researched themselves and came back. So much so that the Ghanaian president referenced our show in one of the African addresses.
Yeah.
And so more and more people now are finding out about this system and their role in it, unbeknownst to them, because the whole thing is compartmentalized on a massive scale. You know, it's like the old story of what happened in Iraq. Remember, they were charging a Sheffield company for building certain pipes that were going to the West.
That's right, yeah.
And so they thought they're building a pipe for something else. What they didn't know is it was to form weapons.
Yeah.
And so they'll get individual groups to build individual parts, and then it goes into a central hub, and then you put it together, and suddenly you've got a weapon of mass destruction.
Yeah.
That's how it works with the compartmentalization, you see. And so the new blueprint for humanity that's the name of the website, the new blueprint for humanity.org. And people can go and read the 29 solutions. And what we're looking for is to engage all people. They are like draft solutions. They're not sign and die per se.
Yeah.
We're looking for people to suddenly take responsibility for their lives again, which is why this system exists.
Mm-hmm.
So we decide how the country should be run. We decide where the money should be spent and how it should be spent, and make it accountable. Because at the moment, no one is accountable for anything. As you found out with the COVID.
Yes.
You know, 3 years ago, people thought that the conspiracy theorists were all nuts, talking about the vaccines being dodgy and this, that, and the other. Well, 3 years later, with loads of people dying who have taken the jab, suddenly that's not a conspiracy anymore. There's your example, you see.
Yeah.
And these people who are passed off as experts, there are no experts on this planet, because we've never been given enough knowledge on any subject.
Yes, I agree. There's not. The word expert is overused, and it actually is given a weight that it doesn't deserve. Yeah. Yeah,
and then we've learned to trust people in white coats.
Yes.
Well, as an example, a nurse or a doctor.
Yeah.
Do you know they do 7 years learning, and not 1 minute of it is spent on cures?
Yes. Yeah.
But I thought they were supposed to fix us or cure us. Yeah. No. There's no learning for those people. So how can they be experts? They're not. And this is what we're finding out.
Yes.
And so we have to come up with a system where we all learn the knowledge on every subject again, and come up with a teaching course to then pass on to the future generations, to give them a chance to take this planet back to the way it was meant to be, with everyone living free and sovereign, having a life experience not based on strife, wars, death, sacrifice, and scarcity.
Yeah. And you mentioned your website for the blueprint. It's newblueprint.org, did you say? Or
the new blueprint for humanity.org.
And the website for your show is that THI.org.
THI hyphen, as you would say over there, show.com.
Okay. What we'll do is put those websites in the show notes for people to find your show and your document about the blueprint. And if you've got other links that you want to share, you mentioned earlier, so you had some information about cases that you wanted to that people could look up. If you want to give us the links for those, we'll put those in the show notes for listeners to research and check out themselves.
Yeah, It's a lot for your listeners to take in.
It's a lot for me to take in. I'm going to say, yeah. I mean, it's you said you researched this for 40 years. It's very difficult to take it in. A
lot of it's not all my words. It's what I do is I collect all kinds and connect the dots. That's what we've done, and follow the trail, like they say. All roads leads to Rome. But everything that all the roads out from Rome leads to we the people. And I appreciate the religious are not going to like what we've said today. I'm sorry that you feel that way, but the truth has to come out.
Yeah.
And one of the things in a phone call was that the Pope rang us up. He was asking for funds out of the trust because they'd been cut off from certain funds because we had cut certain funds or trust funds down and put it back into the trust that they looted, you see. He was asking for funds. And so we gave him 2 conditions. But this was back in November 2019. The first one was that he arrests all the pedophiles and makes them all accountable.
Yeah.
And the second one was, and he was aware, the second condition was he would get with all the other religious denominations and come up with a plan to tell the people the truth about religion.
Yeah.
Now, there's a secret multi-denominational gathering arranged by the Pope for November of 2024. That may well be that solution. He knows. They all know. But it's how the church works. It works based on fear. If you don't go to church, you'll burn in the fires of hell, they say.
Yeah.
Really? I thought that God was supposed to be nice. Well, you start reading through the Bible, it's an egotistical maniac. You will do as I say, otherwise I will send fiery serpents after you.
Yeah.
But nobody asked, what are fiery serpents?
Yeah.
And these are all contained within the book. Does it sound like that God is looking after our best interest and is going to save us? Well, actually, not really.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we have to break down these belief structures that were given to us as children and following a basic set of assumptions that we believe is truth, when assumption does not mean truth.
Yeah. And one thing before we wrap this up, one thing I wanted to discuss or ask you about was very early on, we talked about it not being a good idea to not turn up in court. And I think Roger mentioned that there was some way that when you go to court and you give consent, you've kind of entered that system and you're in a bit of a sticky situation. But what is the alternative then? I think we touched on it earlier that there's some way if you've got. Now I'm sure we can't go into the solution here because I'm sure it's very detailed and
well, I think you Roger can touch more on this, but from what I understand is you ask permission to approach the bench and make a declaration of being a living person.
Right.
Roger?
That might be one option. That's not what I was going to talk about. And like I said, it is quite detailed. So
yes,
this takes deeper study, and I just did a 3.5-hour Zoom on it this weekend on wills and testaments.
I mean, again, if you could send a link to that, we can put that in the show notes for people.
Okay. The There is a way that if you understand the whole concept of wills and testaments and how that's been enclosed in the last few hundred years, you can develop your own will and testament and perfect it and set yourself up as the sovereign or genuine executor of your estate and claim all your property and the rules of which you live under, which you can declare as the true rule of law. And because law is hierarchical, if you do this right, you can come in with a higher claim and you can file copies or certificates and documents to the court before you go there, letting them know that who's showing up. Is it the true person with a higher claim? And can you back that up? So there is a way to do it. The Ucadia information I'm sharing is Frank's building out a website. It's ucadia.org. It's not ready fully yet, but when it is, people will be able to join Ucadia and learn more about this and then start to set these things up for themselves.
Okay, that sounds really interesting for people going into the course.
Yeah.
But from what you said earlier, it seems to be something that you have to do. It's a stance that you take or something you do at the beginning of proceedings. It's no good doing it halfway through a 4-year case.
Think of it this way. You're walking into their private system.
Yes.
So you're announcing this is who's showing up to your private system. Now, like I said earlier, if their legal person doesn't show up, they have a problem. So you're telling them who's showing up, and it's not their legal person because you're claiming your rights and your property back through this process. Yeah. So that's what you're doing. Now, if, like Tommy said, if you're in a situation when you're in there and you haven't done all that, I think you can still, you'd have to go a bit deeper to understand what to say because they will challenge you.
Yes.
And if you want to say, okay, can I approach the branch? The living man is here. I'm not that person. You want to go down that path? They're going to challenge you. And if you hit one of their tripwires, there's 12 presumptions. That's another book and another interview. There's 12 presumptions in a courtroom that you hit any one of those tripwires, you're done for.
Yeah.
It's
again, if you sorry,
difficult. It's very difficult, and I'm not saying it can't be done. Personally, I don't recommend it. Mm-hmm. Well, we've had people in America telling you don't need a driver's license, which is true. You only need a driver's license for commerce. But if you get pulled up by the police, you're going to get a ticket. It's that simple. Now, under the Constitution, which most Americans think there's only one, actually there's 4, and none of them are beneficial for the people. Under the Constitution, it says you are not to pay taxes on your income. And some people refuse to pay taxes and pay the price because they don't know enough, you see. So I would never, ever recommend people to go down that path.
Yes, we're not giving legal advice,
No, it's the same as the people going sovereign. I wouldn't recommend that either. Unless you get access to your trust account, then you are going to lose your health benefits, your unemployment and your pension because you've just declared yourself sovereign. And again, this is where people have to understand more, you see. Yes. I would never tell people not to go to court or not to do this or not to that, and neither would Roger either.
No.
The only way you can do this is to get volumes and volumes of people to understand what Roger's got across today and to a lesser degree what I've got across. And then they have no option but to change it because now it's the will of the people.
It's not you, it's the will of the people.
It's the will of the people. A couple of people going to court and arguing over not paying taxes, they're going to pick you off.
Yes.
For argument's sake, a whole town decides we're not paying income tax because it's actually illegal.
Yeah.
It's not capital gains, you see.
Yes.
And so they make it legal because they've declared you a business which is a dead entity.
Yeah.
And this is where it gets into the Cestui Que trust again. So it all circles back, you see.
Yeah.
And why we need more knowledge.
Yeah.
So whilst there may be a load of things that you find far-fetched in this podcast, the clue to that is to go and research it yourself and gain the knowledge.
When we brought it,
the sin. Remember?
Yes.
Just to give you context, I spent the last 4 years studying this material. And I'm not in any kind of situation that perhaps you are or other people are. I don't have that pressure on me. When you're under that level of pressure, it's difficult to grasp and go to the depth of knowledge and competence needed to do the things that will get you out of the system.
Yeah.
And so from that perspective, you've got to make the best choices with the best legal representation you've got, because you're in the system. And their lawyers will win about 30% of the time. And I suspect that's hope, is they have to have a system where there's hope, otherwise you wouldn't stay in it.
Yeah.
People who self-represent, their success rate's about 2%.
Yeah.
What Ucadia and the Blueprint are doing is setting up a different model and system. It's a completely different jurisdiction. And eventually, if enough people learn and study and become competent, we can actually have an alternative. So, well, I'm not going to go into your private system. I don't like it. I'm going to this system here based on the true rule of law, where I know I will get justice.
Yeah. I mean, that's quite a good place to end it, because what we've come to here is a simple point that the key to change in this and so many other areas of where things are wrong in this world is public awareness and raising. It's that the people in numbers and in mass can't be denied. It's just the people don't stand up very often. And I think that raising awareness is certainly the key to changing family law, I believe. But it sounds like what you're proposing here, it's the same. I think in many areas it's the same. If people don't know, they're not going to change something.
Yeah. What we've done is humanity, from a collective point of view, are lazy.
Yes.
We've accepted technology, which makes us even more lazy.
Yes.
And the schooling system is, and the word education means training of animals, I might add.
Right.
There's that word animals again.
Yeah.
That's the etymology of education. Tells you not to think for yourself.
Yeah.
Why would a schooling system tell children not to think for themselves?
Yeah.
So you only repeat what they tell you.
Yes, it's pretty woeful, the education system. Yeah.
It's governing your mind again. Government.
Yeah.
You know, and that's, again, on a basic level, that's not a conspiracy, that's a fact.
No, well, I mean, why don't
they won't allow the children to think for themselves?
Well, that's exactly. I was just going to say that they don't. Why every school should teach critical thinking?
Correct.
How many do?
You know, and people have to take more responsibility. They've handed over responsibility for their children's welfare to schools.
Yes.
And forgot their role.
Yeah.
You've handed over your health to people with white coats on,
yes.
who are not knowledgeable enough in the subject. You've handed over the running of the country to politicians who don't even discuss policies.
Yeah.
And you hand over children to social services who are run by police authorities and various other things.
Yes.
So where is our responsibility in that? And this is what the people have to take back, is we have to become personally responsible again, which negates all of their laws. Like I said, if we're all personally responsible, we don't need laws. You know, not to steal from someone, not to injure or harm someone, and you know not to kill someone.
Yeah.
That's basic common sense.
Yeah.
So we don't need all that law. You know, it's golden rule. And this is the most important thing now, and that's what the blueprint is all about, is we the people have to get off our lazy collective backsides and fix this world once and for all. Because the system that they believe in, because the lazy thinking, will never, ever fix anything.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter which government you pick. None of them do anything for the benefit of the people.
Yeah.
So isn't it time we, the people, fixed it ourselves? And this is what the blueprint's about.
Yeah.
The initial one is for America. Most of them are generic anyway, so it can be altered to a new blueprint for humanity for England, Scotland, Ireland, and Wales. Yeah. It can be altered for Poland. It can be altered for Germany, because there's people from those countries who've been involved in it.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter which country, you just modify the document based on your own country.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And so, and we want people from all over the world to come and join us, and let's collectively come up with what is the best solution for each aspect of society.
Yeah.
Whether it's law, gardening, you name it.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good place to wrap things up. There's a lot. I mean, we've been talking for 3 hours, and we've gone over so much ground, and there's so much food for thought there. And I hope we're going to add to that with the links that you're going to give me to put in the show notes for people. And also, they've got your own show that they can go and listen to episodes of, and the blueprint that they can read. So I think this episode has had something for everyone, and people can draw their own conclusions.
Absolutely.
And as that's the best way, as we say, to let people think and reason for themselves and research and see where they stand. Sorry, Tommy.
As an example, and Roger will tell you this, when I gave him the conditions for coming up with the law, he thought most of what I was saying was wrong.
Yeah.
And found out everything that I'd said was correct with detailed research.
Yeah.
You know, Roger.
I was going to say, there's a classic Tommyism. You've ruined everything.
Yeah.
You know, it's about ruining the illusions that we've all, and we all talk privately about certain bits that, you know, but it's time to humanity to come together with a single voice. You know, come and help us with the communal gatherings, come up with the ideas. You know, there's some fantastic stuff whereby we're creating people who are interested in specific solutions, and so they get involved in what they're interested in. If you're not interested in law, you're not interested in law. And so there's plenty of other solutions, and if there's something that's short, then we add it in. And so then people take part in what their interest is, whether that's finance, whether that's gardening. Like I said, there's no end of things that has to change, because this planet is finished. And I'm not saying that lightly. The whole system is coming down. It's collapsing around us.
Yeah.
And only we, the people, can fix it.
Yeah. Well, thanks very much for coming on, Tommy and Roger. I really appreciate this discussion. And as I say, I think it's going to be a lot of food for thought for people, and I think they'll certainly get a lot out of it. So thanks again, and take care and best wishes with the project.
Well, what we can offer is maybe in a month's time.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know whether you've got a forum where your listeners can ask questions, and maybe we come on again and answer their questions.
That's something I've wanted to do, but we've never actually done that. I mean, I guess it'd be something like a Twitter Spaces or something like that. But we've never really done that. It's something I want to do more of in the future. But
well, the other thing is, given this is based around law, is we sent you the 13 sessions that Roger did. That is currently is not available per se, although Roger can send you the actual link to it. We're building a website where all those 13 podcasts are going on. And maybe they can ask questions on if you can post the 13 that I gave you. And if they want to ask questions on those 13, we can come on again and answer their questions for them. Okay,
that sounds good. Yeah, we can do that. With the Twitter Spaces, what I'd initially thought of doing was inviting a solicitor on to help people who've got questions with their cases, and then build it from there. But it's just something I haven't done yet. But when I do, with that, we can look at the Twitter Spaces side of things, because I do think that's worthwhile.
The solicitor who is soliciting.
Yes, well, yes. Yes.
And sometimes words have two meanings.
Yes.
A good way to
but it's when you start out and when you're first in eye contact with your child. I mean, it's a much more extreme version of your boiler not working, and you needing a plumber. You'll get your credit card out and pay anything, and that is times 100 and 1,000 when it's a child, and you just go run into the solicitor and you say, "Here's my card, please do something," and that's it. You're in a state of trauma, and you're acting from a state of trauma from pretty much there till the conclusion of the case years later.
This whole thing is for the benefit of the children. A recent excerpt that was shown to me was a member of the Club of Rome, another secret society, Rome again. And he revealed to the UN people, which is why we're going to the UN with the blueprints, that 8 million children go missing on this planet every single year. Yes,
I've heard stats. Well, I don't know about the 8 million, but I've certainly heard stats.
8 million. About 8 years ago on my show, I put out 900,000 children go missing in America alone, and no one believed me. And then there was an FBI report that said 850,000, so it wasn't far off. And that's every year.
I've heard.
So we have a duty to protect the children far more than we have.
Yes, I think that's true. Okay, well, thanks very much again, Tommy and Roger.
Thank you.
As I say, send us the links and we'll put them on the show notes, and we hope to hear from you again. And good luck with the project.
Thank you.
Right, take care. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode. Please join us next time.
So we have a duty to protect the children far more than we have.
Yes, I think that's true. Okay, well, thanks very much again, Tommy and Roger.
Thank you.
As I say, send us the links and we'll put them on the show notes, and we hope to hear from you again. And good luck with the project.
Thank you.
Right, take care. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode. Please join us next time.